Miami, Indiana College Football National Championship Monday night. Who you got? Stick around. I'll give you who I like here in just a little bit. I'm going to go through this and break this thing down. There's two great storylines. Miami, the U. A lot of people asking the question, is the U finally back as they punched their ticket and play for a national championship in their home stadium, by the way, at Hard Rock Stadium? Or is the great story of Kurt Signetti and the Indiana Hoosiers the best story? I think personally they're great stories. I think Mario Cristobal doesn't get enough credit for the job he's done of coming home to Miami where he played after leaving Oregon. The knock was he couldn't win a big game. I said this on a couple different podcasts over the last couple weeks. I think that Mario Cristobal left Oregon in really good shape. And no disconnecting Dan Lanning here is Dan Lanning obviously has taken Oregon to the next step, but Mario Cristobal left him some players. And Dan Lanning's a great coach. He'll get there one day. The knock on him too is he hasn't won the big game. In big games, Oregon's been blown out of the building the last couple of years. But I think they're going to be really good again next year with Dante Moore announcing he's going to come back. So I'll credit Dan Lanning and the Ducks. But then you get Mario Cristobal, who leaves Oregon and comes home to Miami. Last couple of years, they've kind of struggled a little bit after high expectations. And this year, they drop a game, and they drop two games. And a lot of people say, well, Notre Dame belonged in. Notre Dame had no business getting in over Miami because Miami beat them head-to-head. Now, you can make the argument, and I would agree with people, Notre Dame should have been in over Tulane, and Notre Dame should have been in over James Madison. I would have loved to see Notre Dame get in over those two teams, but I understand why they didn't. I do think Notre Dame had a team that could have competed to win a national championship. There's no doubt in my mind, and I feel bad for, Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, but you know what? Beat Miami, and you were in. So fast forward it, Miami gets to punch their ticket. They beat Ole Miss, which that was a fantastic game. And people will say maybe at the end of the game, pass interference call in the end zone. I don't know. They let them play quite a bit. I was really impressed. I will say this, in a losing effort, I was really impressed with Ole Miss. Trinidad Chambliss did what he did, threw for, I think he was 23 of 37 with the touchdown. BC ran for over 100. They ran it 21 times. The Miami offense ran the ball 51 times. 51 times against Ole Miss. They dominated, again, the trenches. But the one area where I will say I think Miami struggled, and Miami struggled getting the Chambliss, not because the defensive line, Bain and Messidor, weren't good. It's just the offense that Ole Miss runs. They get it out of Trinidad's hands really fast, out of that shotgun. They couldn't get to him. So I think that game plan for Ole Miss, I think Charlie Weiss called a phenomenal game in that game. I think Charlie Weiss called a phenomenal game prior to throughout the playoff, and credit Lane Kiffin, let him come back. And there were some other coaches that did come back and coach for Ole Miss, and Pete Golden did a great job of taking over that team. We'll see what he does next year. Trinidad Chambliss, his waiver got declined, so there's a good chance he's going to opt into the NFL draft, or I think his waiver is going to go to the courts, and we'll see what happens. If he doesn't come, Ole Miss could look a little bit different next year. Lacey said he's coming back. So we'll see what Pete Golden does in a full year on his own if he doesn't have the guy in Trinidad Chambliss. But credit Ole Miss. Miami in that game, that last drive, Carson Beck, that was a big-time drive by a quarterback that's played a lot of football. And he took a lot of heat. He started off the season a little shaky, turning the ball over, low quarterback rating. And then the second half of the season, it was the Carson Beck I think we all thought we would see, thrown for, I think it was 24 touchdowns and like 4 interceptions the second part of the season. He had a big-time drive in that game to score late as he ran one in. And again, they ran the ball 51 times. Let that sink in. 51 times. And then Indiana against Oregon, that game was never in doubt at all for the Hoosiers. And I've watched a lot of Indiana late. I didn't watch a lot of Indiana during the regular season. I think from the Penn State game on, I watched a lot of Indiana football, obviously because they were getting all the hype, and rightfully so. They deserved it. Mendoza, the great story, winning the Heisman Trophy, the great story with Kurt Signetti, which, by the way, if they win the national championship, basically a home game for Miami. If Indiana finds a way Monday night to win this thing, I think it's the greatest turnaround in sports history. You can arguably say they're the best story And I think the job when Kurt Signetti came over, of course, we remember if you follow college football, he took the mic during halftime of a basketball game at Indiana and said, Ohio State stinks, Michigan stinks, Purdue stinks. And the last 2 years, man, last year they get to the playoff. This year they playing for a national championship. Not a lot of five-star recruits on this team. He's done it with player development, brought a lot of guys over with him from James Madison. And the Mendoza story, I think, is a great story, right? Comes from Cal, has a great year, but they got great players. They got great players. Elijah Surratt, Charlie Becker, Omar Cooper Jr., the receivers, all three really good receivers for Indiana. And they don't have a lot of flaws. They don't make a lot of mistakes. And I think it's going to have to take a really, really good performance from Miami to beat Indiana. I think if Indiana self-destructs, which they just haven't, could they? Yes. Will they? I don't know. I'm a betting guy. I don't think I would bet a lot of money that they're going to self-destruct. Now, listen, Mendoza could come in. Miami can hit him. He could throw 2 or 3 interceptions, but they just have so many weapons. And I think a couple keys for Miami in this game, they got to commit to running the football because Indiana against Alabama and Indiana against Oregon, Alabama and Oregon, they could not run the football. And if you think you're going to get away from trying to run the football and just make this game about throwing the ball 30, 40 times with Carson Beck, Miami's in for a long game. So I think Miami's going to have to stay committed to running the football. And I'm not saying they got to run for 100 yards. If they can run for 60 yards, I think they got a shot in this game. Mark Fletcher Jr. In 3 playoff games for Miami, 400 yards rushing. And I think for them too, if they can create some running game tomorrow night, I think it's going to open up some shots downfield for Carson Beck. And listen, Malachi Tony can take it to the house at any time. They like to run a lot of screens. They run a lot of the screens to get Malachi Tony and some of those receivers in space. Problem is Indiana tackles really well in space. So we'll see if they can commit to that. And I think the other thing too is I think they got to dominate the line of scrimmage on defense. I think that's what's gotten Miami here is they've been physical up front on the line of scrimmage, both offensively, defensively. Both these teams, they play the exact style of football. They both like to run the ball. They're both really good against the run. And Bain and Messidor, the 2 studs, they got to get home, man. They got to get home and play the game in the backfield. They got to get some tackles for a loss. And I thought a crazy stat as I was going through the numbers here. And listen to this one. Indiana in the 2 playoff games, run to pass, 90 run plays to 36 pass plays. Think of that. 90 runs, 36 pass plays. I think Mendoza's only got like 5 incomplete passes in the 2 playoff games that haven't even been close. So they like to run the football, and I think that plays into Miami's strengths, right? They can stop the run. Both of them top 5 in college football and run defense. Should be a really good game up front. Charlie Becker for Indiana's established himself as one of the best receivers in the country. Elijah Surratt, one of the best players in the country. But another key stat line for me was for Indiana. When they average 4 yards or more per carry, they average over 42 points a game. So if they're having success running the football, they score a lot of points. And they did that in both of these playoff games against Alabama and against Indiana. So how well can they run the football? We'll have to wait and see. And I think for Indiana, it's going to be really key. They got to be able to tackle in space. As I said, Malachi Tony, they like to run a lot of screens to get him the ball in space. He's dynamic, as are the Miami receivers. But I think the other matchup I'm really looking forward to seeing this game is that Miami secondary against the Indiana receivers. Because I think the Miami secondary is going to play a lot of press coverage. So I think Mendoza is going to have to beat one-on-one coverage. And we'll see if he can make those throws. He's been really accurate in this postseason. So we're going to see how well they play. And I think, again, for me, is going to be, can Indiana get to Carson Beck? Because if they can get to Carson Beck, rattle him early in this game, I do think that they have a legit shot. This game can be a blowout if they can get to Carson Beck. Now, I think the line for this game was like 7.5, which I think is absolutely crazy. Because in other words, that's telling me that really the line's 10.5. Because you would think that they'd have to give Indiana 3 points for playing basically at Hard Rock Stadium, which is a home game for Miami. So you'd have to figure that's 10.5. The line's 7.5. I think that's a really big line for a national championship game. But I'm really excited to see it. I'm over under on how many times they saw Signetti on the field with the facial expressions. And I said this on another podcast earlier in the week. I don't know if this could happen, but I made some crazy prediction. I said, if Indiana wins the national championship, if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I pick the phone up, I call Kurt Signetti, I leave a blank check, and I say, write and tell me how much. He's from that area. Now, he said he's a college guy. He made that decision years ago, and good for him. But you also don't have the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the historic franchises in NFL history, that can come calling for you. But he did pass up, I would think, that opportunity to go to Michigan, LSU, Auburn, Florida. Like, there were a lot of big jobs in college football that I'm sure would have paid him more money. But Indiana, I didn't know, was has one of the biggest booster alumni following in the country. So they're paying him well. They're paying his coaching staff well. So we'll see. It was just a shot in the dark where I said, maybe Pittsburgh comes calling. Signetti rides off into the sunset like Jim Harbaugh did, a few years ago, won the national championship, and then went to the NFL. I could see it. Do I think it'll happen? I don't know. They'll probably build a statue of Signetti outside the stadium after he wins the national championship, if he wins the national championship. So I think it's two really good storylines. And I got to tell you, I'm a Big Ten guy. I don't care who wins the game because I love both teams. I think it's great to see, the Michael Irvins on the sidelines. You see all the former Miami players that are on the sidelines. Now, listen, Michael Irvin goes a little overboard on the sidelines, and I kind of get tired of seeing him, but I get it. He's excited. Those guys are diehard, and it's good to see them back. I'm sure Ray Lewis, all those guys will be back. Again, credit Mario Cristobal. I think he's done a great job this year. But if Indiana wins this national championship, that is 3 years in a row the Big Ten has won the national championship. So you get Michigan, Ohio State, and now you could get Indiana. Imagine what that would do for the SEC. They would go crazy if Indiana wins this thing. And I heard, too, that they're talking about next year, we should have an answer at the end of January. They might go to a 16-team playoff, and then the following year, or I think 2 years after that, they're going to go to 24 teams, I heard, and the Big Ten and SEC are the ones basically controlling that. So I think next year we'll see the 16 teams. And I saw the guarantee, as long as Notre Dame finishes within the top 12, they're in the college football playoff. So we'll see what happens with that. So people are going to ask me, who do I like Monday night? I'm going to stick with my gun, and I'm going to stay with Indiana. I think Indiana wins this thing 28-13. I think they cover the 7.5. I think the game can be close, but I just don't see Indiana making a lot of mistakes. I think it's their year. Ever since that Penn State game when they had the tiptoe in the back of the end zone to win that game, and then just the way they've won games, I can't find many flaws. They tackle well in space. They're tough on the line of scrimmage. Quarterback doesn't make a lot of mistakes, doesn't really get rattled. Now, if Miami can get ahead of them by a touchdown, 10 points, we haven't seen Indiana behind like that all season. So could they put a drive together? Can they rattle Mendoza? We'll have to wait and see what happens. I could see Indiana blowing them out of the building, but I don't think it's going to happen just because it's a home game. I do think that stadium, people are saying it's going to be like 70% Miami fans and 30% Indiana. I think it's going to be flipped. I really do. I think you're going to see 60% or better Indiana fans, and I think you're going to see 40, 50% Miami fans. So I think you're going to see a lot of Indiana colors in that stadium on Monday night. So I'm going to go with Indiana 28-13 on Monday night. Leave me your comments of who you like and what your score predictions will be. Indiana wins 28-13. Enjoy the national championship game.